Hi everybody and welcome back to Every Stitch Counts. It has been a hot... Your reminder to stay hydrated with something, preferably water. Hi everybody, it's been a minute since I've been here, but we're back and I have a lot of things to show you. Some new cast-ons, some acquisitions, lots of finished objects as you can see, which I'm really excited about, and some really interesting things to talk to you about in terms of correcting fit issues on constructions that I'm not super comfortable with, such as bottom up. So if you're into any of those things and you want to hear about me talk through some of those topics, please feel free to stay. For those of you that are new here, my name is Charlotte and I'm a knitter and maker and aspiring sewist, although I haven't had the time to really delve into that hobby yet as of late. But on this channel we talk about mostly knitting, things that I've been working on, making, my process, and things that I learn along the way. I think one of the things that has really helped me accelerate my skill in this space is listening to what other people have done to address issues that they come up with fit or find patterns that have taught them a lot of new skills. And I've just learned so much from this space, so I thought why not share some of those things with all of you as well. I'm based in the Washington State area and I live with my Australian Shepherd lady. So if you're into any of those things, feel free to stick around. The first thing I want to talk about is my Fjellture Lite. This sweater was on the needles for quite a while. I have some footage of me wearing it so you can see the fit, but in general, I'm really happy with this sweater. It was quite a journey. It was a bottom-up construction, so you knit the bottom portion of the body and then you knit the bottom of the sleeves. Then you put stitches on from the bottom of the sleeve and the bottom of your body where the armpit is going to be, and you put those stitches on stitch holders and then you join everything in the round and then you knit the yoke upwards. There's a little bit of shaping in the back done by just German short rows, and then she did it's not quite a turtleneck, it's more of an aggressive mock neck, which I actually quite like. I've never done a neck like this and I really enjoyed it a lot. What did I knit? I think I started out knitting a size small, but I had so many just unexpected things happen when I was making this sweater that I think I've actually ended up making something closer to the medium, but I'm truly not sure. And I'll explain why that is the case in a second. But we'll just say, for the sake of my actual measurements and what the measurements of this ended up being, that I made the medium. I knit this up with a yarn that my mom purchased for me from Maryland Sheep and Wool earlier this year. It's a very odd yarn, and I only say odd because I've never purchased or used anything quite like it. It's a blended yarn with many different breeds of sheep, even many different types of fiber. There's even possum in the base, and it's very fuzzy, as you can see. I held this base white color double with like lace weight, silk and linen and cotton blend of yarn. There's a little bit of wool in there as well. I can't remember the exact breakdown of it. In truth, I don't know that it would have really mattered if I'd used like a pure Shetland wool or the lace weight yarn that I ended up using. What happened was I knew I needed to hold this fuzzy yarn with something, and so I ended up just going to my local yarn shop and picking up whatever they had. So I'll just start from the beginning of making this sweater, and I'll go through, the process of how everything came together from the time I cast it on to when I actually finished it, maybe a week or so ago at this point. So as I said, it's a bottom-up construction. I believe I've done bottom up once and I didn't like the finished product. So I was a little bit apprehensive to even do that, but I thought, you know, I'm going to trust the pattern. I did a gauge. My gauge was good, and I chose, like I said, size small at first, I believe. Yeah, size small. So I started with the body and it was nice. It was just in the round. There's no shaping on the body. It's just a straight tube. And so it's a lot of mindless stockinette stitching. And I liked that. It was nice to have something that was mindless like that. The sleeves were when it got a little bit dicey. I cast on for the sleeves and I realized about halfway through the first sleeve that I had no idea what my yoke depth was going to be, because I could have probably done some of the math of what the row height of my gauge was, but I didn't know how applicable that would be because so much of the yoke is in this color work motif. I was thinking through if that would actually work, and I was like, I don't really know if that will work. I was so far into the sleeve that I didn't want to rip it out, and I didn't even know what I would do if I ripped it out and started over and made it longer, shorter, or whatever. And so I just kept knitting, and I tried to try it on when it was just the tube of the sleeve and think through, okay, if I want the armpit of it to be not like up in my armpit, but maybe sit an inch or so below that. I tried to think that through and like, okay, I'd want my sleeve to end here, so that would mean it is X amount of centimeters long. I just went for that. I believe the original pattern called for the sleeves to be 40 some centimeters long before you split and join it together in the yoke. I knit it maybe 6 or 7 centimeters longer than that just because I'm very tall. I made it a little bit longer. I knit the second sleeve. And keep in mind, this has been a project that's kind of been slogging on since I started it. I didn't really enjoy knitting on it in the summer because it is quite thick and it's very warm. It was very sweaty to work on it. And I wasn't motivated because I wasn't going to be able to wear it right away. So all that to say, I didn't finish the sleeves until maybe beginning of October, probably mid-October even. And then I realized that I had to think about the yoke when I was there. That the bottom and the bottom of the sleeves was straightforward enough. But then when I got to the point of realizing that I had to think about the yoke depth specifically, so how many centimeters it goes from, your neck down to where it's going to join in this armpit. I was just not motivated to think about it at all because I felt nervous that it wasn't going to fit. And also at this time, I realized that I was playing the game of yarn chicken, which, if you're unfamiliar with the term, is just a cute little term that means you're not sure you're going to have enough of any one of your colors of yarn to finish the actual sweater. So all of this was running through my mind before I joined any of this together to even work on the yoke. I knew when I first cast it on, again, that I have a very long torso, but I didn't modify bottom of the sweater at all. I knit it to 42 centimeters, which is what I believe she calls for in the pattern, like 42 centimeters. And I just knew, I had a gut feeling that I wasn't going to have enough yarn. And so I ended up running a strand of waste yarn, maybe 6 or 7 centimeters below where I had previously finished. So like say I had all the stitches on waste yarn up here, I ran a thread through the stitches further down, and then I ripped out maybe 6 or 7 centimeters of work that I'd already done because I knew I needed that yarn somewhere, and I knew I probably would be happier wearing a sweater that's slightly cropped versus a sweater that has short sleeves. And then I joined everything together in the round, and I was still pretty nervous that I wasn't going to have enough yarn. So I think I did maybe 2 or 3 rows before I started the color work motif. And I was surprised because the original pattern, there's no, like, you just immediately start the color work. And I know enough from past experience of knitting other color work sweaters that that usually doesn't work for me. I usually have to add an inch or so, but I didn't have the yarn abundance to do that. And so I knit a couple rows and then I did my decreases and then I started with the yoke. Everything was going fine. I couldn't really add depth once I was in the actual color work. And I just wasn't sure what it was going to do. And I couldn't try it on, obviously, until like the neck portion was actually done and the yoke portion was complete. So I'm frantically trying to get through this color work to see if I'm even going to have enough yarn. I get through the color work, and by the time I got to the neck portion and doing the short rows, I realized, okay, I'm most likely 95% sure I'm going to have enough yarn. And then I did a few extra rows, maybe half an inch, before I started my short rows for the back neck shaping. And then I was done. And you know what? The pattern called for a tubular cast off, Italian bind off, and I just, at that point, did not have it within my heart to do that. So I just did a basic bind off. That's maybe a little bit too tight, but I honestly am like, it's fine. But then we get to the interesting part. If you didn't think that was interesting, we get to the really interesting part now. I finished the sweater, I try it on, and it is as I feared. The yoke is way too short. Like, not even, okay, it's a little bit tight. Like, it is up in here. It pulls at the color work. And I knew also that, okay, even if it blocks, like the color work, I find when I do them, the color work doesn't block as much. Like, it smooths, but if you knit it way too tight, it's probably going to remain too tight and it's not really going to grow much. What grows is consistent stitches, things like stockinette, anything that you've done for like huge sections, that will probably grow and stretch more. But because there's so much tension happening both on the vertical and on the horizontal of color work, I find that it doesn't really change in its shape. So thankfully, when I did try it on, the yoke across my shoulders did fit. But what was also crazy was that I knit the sleeves so much longer than the pattern called for. And I kid you not, when I tried it on before I did this like intense modification on the yoke, the sleeves were like way up here because the yoke was pulled so tight up here. And I was just like, well, I either have to give this sweater away to somebody who it's going to fit, or I have to rip back everything from the collar. I have to rip out all the color work, and I would have to make the sleeves, I would have to make the sleeves longer, but then I'm still kind of caught playing this game of yarn chicken. And then I was thinking through and I thought, oh my gosh, I saw a video of Lily Kate Makes. She posted a video of how she lengthened the body of one of her sweaters, and she essentially ran 2 sets of needles over 3 rows. So say my fingers are the knit rows. Each one is a knit row. She ran a needle through the bottom one. She ran a needle through the top. And then she took scissors and she cut this row completely. And then from there, she separated all of them. So it would end up being, this now because she cut the row that was in the middle. Then she lengthened the body. I thought, well, shoot, if she could do that to the bottom of the sweater, maybe I can do that to the yoke portion. Now, I did not do this gracefully. I did not do it with any guidance, really. I kind of just ran my waist thread where I thought the row was as best I could, like maybe a row or 2 below where the color work was, because I also had no margin really for stitches that I knit in stockinette that were exclusively in the round. So I knew that I had to separate everything if I was going to do this, which I ended up doing. I had to run thread over the shoulders, over where the yoke was, and I had to do that on both ends or both sides. And then I took my scissors and I cut this whole sweater apart, and probably about halfway through, trying to take the stitches that were now on waist thread and put them on my needles, I thought, oh my god, like, what have I done? What have I done? Because my scissors were so sharp that they ended up cutting some of the stitches that they weren't supposed to cut. So I had to pick up rows further down on like the body portion. The armholes were just a mess. I had random threads that were like disconnected from the thread that they were supposed to be connected to. It was just a little bit of a disaster. But I kept with it, and I just kept picking up rows below where the yarn was really fraying and was really not going to be able to be stable at that point. Then I got everything on the waist thread and on stitch holders that was supposed to be on stitch holders, and then I took the extra yarn that I had after I had previously finished the whole body, and I added maybe an inch and a half, an inch and a half probably, to the yoke. And I did that top down. So the yoke, I was knitting it up this way. And then after this whole debacle, I was knitting down just in the round. So you might think, if you're listening to this story, oh my god, that sounds horrible. It was, but I was curious to see how it would turn out also, and if I could really fix it, because I really liked the design. I liked the sweater. My mom gave me the yarn. I didn't want to give it away. I wanted to try to keep it. I add the length to the body, or to the yoke. Then comes the really difficult part of this whole thing, which is taking a needle and thread and using Kirschner stitch to sew everything back together again, which took many moons, many hours. I think I spent a total of 4.5 hours collectively stitching every single piece back together again. It was probably the most stressful part because like there's a ton of fabric at this point and it's all getting pulled in the wrong direction, and I was worried my tension was going to be bad. It was just not a fun process, but I ended up getting everything stitched back together. And the last kind of really surprising thing that happened with it was once I got this portion stitched together and I got the arms attached again, I was back right where I started before I ripped it all apart again, which was I just had to Kirschner stitch these stitches that were on stitch holders before. I just had to put the armpit together and close that hole. And when I went to do that after the fact, I realized that there was not the little teeny tiny hole that people find so annoying in the armpit, but rather a massive gaping hole on either side. I kid you not, the hole was maybe that big for reference. I mean, an inch and a half in diameter. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, is it never gonna end? The issues with this? I will admit, I kind of fudged seaming that together. As best I could, I found the line of the fabric that would not buckle weirdly and that would come together as smoothly as possible. And I tried to, graph the stitches in a way that it looked like that didn't happen. I probably could have spent some time researching how to technically and correctly graph stitches, but at this point it was like 11 p.m., 3 days after I had totally ripped this thing apart and stitched it back together again. And I just needed it to be done because I was going to throw it away if I didn't finish it. I ended up doing it, and truthfully, it did block out. There's a couple parts in here that, a really skilled knitter could see probably that I fudged it a bit. But when I'm just wearing this, you can't see it. All of that to say, I freaking love this sweater. I am so surprised. I've worn this maybe 6 times within the first week and a half, 2 weeks that I've finished it. It's not scratchy at all. It's not pilling, like it's fluffy. It's got this fluff to it, but it doesn't pill. It sheds a little bit, which can be kind of annoying if you're wearing like a dark coat, but I love the color work. I think that actually holding the wool double with that very drapey linen silk blended yarn, it adds a real weight to it, and it gives this sweater a really beautiful drape. Like, it's not stiff at all. It doesn't feel rustic in the sense that it's scratchy. Like, this is next to skin soft. I've worn this multiple times with nothing underneath, just as a top. I have no issues with it. I think I have maybe a little bit more tolerance to wool on my skin since I've been knitting and wearing a lot of wool. But I really think that anybody could wear this, especially even just with like a cami or a t-shirt if you're sensitive, like around your neck. I love it. I love it, love it, love it, love it. I think it fits great, which I'm just like, there is a Lord above, because like, how could it fit so great given everything that happened? But I love it. I do recommend the pattern, but I would probably recommend, if you have the skill or know somebody who can help you convert it to be top down, it would be very easy to do. I've done that before. I think I just wanted to try doing bottom up and see how that went for me. In hindsight, I probably should have just taken the 30 minutes to think through and convert the pattern to be a top down for my own personal preference and liking of how I like to make my sweaters. I also received some good feedback from people on my last video about ways to mitigate the issue of length when doing bottom up. And I should have thought of this, but this is why I love this community so much. A lot of people just said, you can do a provisional cast on at the point, wherever you want, really. Most people do it at the ribbing because I think the provisional cast on can leave things a bit wonky. But they said just do a provisional cast on and then essentially, knit this part bottom up and then do your yoke. Then you can add length everywhere else. Definitely think that that's a super good way to mitigate length, given that my issue is always that my yoke depth is not deep enough. I think that I would still prefer to do it top down, because my issue is not necessarily always the arms or the length of the body, it's always the yoke. So even if I did a provisional cast on, I'm a little bit unsure how I would see about the fit on the yoke. So more on that. If you have thoughts on that though, or you've dealt with something, or you've done something similar to what I had to do with this, let the people know in the comments. Because I learned a ton making this sweater, and I thought this was going to be like a mindless project that took no time, and it ended up being one of the things that I learned the most with, and really did prove to me that almost anything with knitting is fixable, and I love that. I love that you can fix it. It can be fixed. And if you yourself can't do it, this community of people online, connect with them. I mean, if someone messaged me and said, hey, I need a video chat you to figure out how to do this, I would happily try to do that. I think that lots of people would do that. I think that it's just such a good community. I think that people have so much more skill at their fingertips to tap into with the fact that so many of us share our projects and our process online. So, little tangent, but this is my Fjellture Lite, and while she was a journey, most things that are worth your salt tend to be hard. So I love her, and I'm excited to wear her, and she's really turned into my Christmas sweater, so very excited. But okay, my second finished object, the test knit that I was doing for Spoonful of Talent, and she's recently changed her name, and I'll just put it down below here. Actually released this pattern today, the day that I'm filming this, so I will link this pattern down below. but this was the Golden Fall Test Knit. I love it. This sweater was just such a treat to work on. It turned out so beautiful. The lace on it, I loved it. And I loved the process of being a test knitter. Definitely something that I would do again, given that, you know, everything lines up with timing. A little bit about the pattern before I get into the actual knitting of it and what yarn I used. It is a top-down raglan construction with a turtleneck, and it is knit, I knit the size medium, and I used the Sandnesgarn Tin Silk Mohair, which I've linked this before, but I will insert the yarn, you know, over here somewhere or down below. And then I used it held double with Rowan's Felted Tweed in the color Cinnamon. And it's this camel color, but there are tweediness and little flecks of silver-ish colors, a cobalt blue, and like black. So in the sunlight, this really, I think, is just a super interesting sweater color to look at. I really enjoy it. And the tin silk, because there's so much silk in that mohair, it has a real shine to it, especially in the sunlight. So I loved this yarn. It was the first time I made anything out of the Rowan Felted Tweed or the Sandnesgarn Tin Silk. I definitely probably wouldn't use it for everything because it is a bit expensive. This yarn and this sweater, like the materials alone, I think was about $200. So very expensive, but I can really feel the quality in this yarn and in this fabric that it made. I've worn this maybe 7 or 8 times. There's not one spot that looks like it's pilling. I can tell already it's going to hold up amazingly, which I'm very excited about. This angling that you get in the collar, how it's bigger at the top and it cinches in, and it has this nice edge that kind of shapes in and then flares back out. All of that is achieved through the very basic technique of regauging. And regauging is where you simply change your needle size up or down to achieve whatever shaping you want rather than increasing or decreasing stitches. I don't know that if I was to make it again, I would do it that way. I think I prefer an actual decrease of stitches, and maybe you could also couple that with regauging your needle. I've done that in the past as well. But what ends up happening with this is it stretches a bit, and what I really wish is that I just had knit longer with the bigger size, because the shoulders, you know, stretch the fabric out. And because the collar is not quite, in my opinion, my humble opinion, long enough, you can see the bottom of the collar. It just doesn't quite hug my neck like this one. This hugs my neck. And if I was to then start knitting a folded over edge for a turtleneck, this height of this collar would stay the same because it's already cinched in enough. Where this one I felt just could have benefited from maybe actually doing some decreases, but I still really like the collar. It's nothing wrong with the function of it. And I've seen lots of sweaters, even in stores and out in public, that people haven't made that have this fit of a collar, where it's not really a turtleneck. It's more of a cowl almost, or a short turtleneck. So it all comes down to personal preference. That's the only reason I make that comment. It's not a fault on the pattern at all. I think that it knits up really beautifully. We'll start with moving on from the collar now, but like I said, this is knit top down. So you pick up the top portion, you knit in the flat, back and forth, you do your neck shaping, so you're going back and forth and you're slowly increasing, and then you join in the front and you start doing your lace motif. And the reason you do that is so that you have more height in the back of your sweater to account for you don't want the sweater to like pull you at the neck, and you don't want the back of your neck to be overly exposed. Like your front and back is almost like this. And then you place your markers for all of your motifs that you're doing. There's really only 2 different motifs that you do on this, so it's pretty simple if you're new to lace, which I was. But she has this bauble lace motif, and then she has, you know, the leaves, the falling leaves, which is this lace motif. The only techniques which were new to me was the baubles and then the yarn overs mixed with decreases in order to get the lace leaning. The yarn overs are what create the holes in lace. And then because a yarn over is technically an increase, you couple every yarn over with an adjacent decrease in some form of the pattern. So any combination of that is really what gives you lace. So if you understand that technically, that lace is just essentially increasing via a yarn over and then decreasing via any method of decreasing, that's going to give you lace. Her baubles, I'm just going to say I really liked the way she did her baubles. I've done baubles in the past and I have not liked them. I've done them with the actual knitting needle and they just haven't been very round, they haven't been very tight, and they also just haven't stood out. I just haven't liked the way that they looked. But she did her baubles with a crochet needle, which I'd never done before, but I really like. I think they stand up off of the fabric really nicely, so you don't lose the definition of them, but they're also all very consistent in size across the whole sweater, and they all look exactly the same. So highly recommend that if you have not done that technique. I don't know how to explain it, so I'm not going to try, but there's lots of videos about, you know, how to make baubles with a crochet hook. The last thing, there was some simple, I guess not the last thing, but there were some simple decreases for the sleeves. Very simple. You just decrease along the bottom edge. There's no shaping in the body. And then her hems were, I think they're very pretty. I've again never done this, but you downsize in your needles, and then you knit 10 rows of just plain stockinette, and then I don't know if you can see that, but then you do 1 row of purl bumps, and then you knit another 10 rows of stockinette and you fold it. And there's a really simple, it's not quite Kirschner stitch, but you're essentially taking a needle and thread and grafting the stitches back down on themselves further down, so it creates this really nice folded cuff. And I quite like it because it doesn't cinch in at all. In fact, it kind of flares out a little bit, and it just, I think, ends up looking very chic. It looks like a really nice, polished, almost sewn edge, almost like the hem of pants. I just think it looks really pretty. I definitely could see myself doing that with some other sweaters. And I think rather than doing a traditional like ribbed hem, makes this sweater feel more like a blouse than like a thick, warm sweater. And I'd never really made anything like that so far in the things that I've made. I've made a lot of sweaters, and this felt like I had just made myself a really pretty blouse, and I just really loved it. It totally opened my mind to some of the other things that I could make in the future. I just loved it. I love the process. I love Lucy's other designs. She has one on the needles now that I think is called, it's like Nostalgia. I don't know the name of what she's working on, but it's got lace on it, and it has this really cool black little bit of color work detail amongst the lace, and it just looks really pretty. So I'm hoping that she enjoyed the test knit that I did, and that if I apply for that one when she's ready, that I get to knit that one as well, because I loved working with her. I loved getting to see the whole process of working with test knitters, and I really loved her design as well. I thought it was, I just think it's really pretty. And again, I think this will hold up really well. If you're looking to splurge for yourself maybe on a sweater, I really can't recommend this combination enough. And again, I haven't worn it for years at this point, but I've worn it a lot in the short time that I've had it, and it has not pilled even slightly, and I think that it will probably remain that way. I think it's going to hold up really well. So that is my Golden Fall test knit sweater, my first test knit, and hopefully not my last, because I just really loved the process and I learned a lot. I have one more finished object to show you, which is just a tiny thing, and then we'll get into the works in progress. So, do you remember, this was a while ago, but I had gone to a wool festival down in Oregon with my mom, and I bought some blue yarn that I still haven't done anything with, some blue like hand-dyed yarn. I bought a button. I bought a lot of random stuff, and one of the random things that I bought was a skein of pure white Angora yarn that was hand spun by this woman who, she has rabbits and she has Angoras, and she does a lot of hand spinning, and she sells bats and little bags of fiber. And I bought maybe 150 yards of pure white, 100% hand spun Angora. And it was very expensive, but she really sold me on it, and I really kind of connected with her, and so I wanted to buy something from her. And so I bought 150 yards, and I knew at the time that I probably was just going to end up doing something like a Sophie scarf with it. And I kind of held out. I tried a couple different things in terms of the small scarf things that you can do with that much yarn. I realized that I wasn't loving any of it, and so I just decided to make a Sophie scarf over the last couple days with it. And this is how it came out. I haven't woven the ends in, and I haven't blocked it yet, but you know, it'll fit like a Sophie scarf will. And I think it'll actually block out quite a bit to be a little bit longer than it is now. It's quite stretchy. I didn't refer back to the actual pattern to make this. I just picked a needle size that I thought would work well, because it's got a quite uneven weight to the yarn because it's hand spun. And I ended up choosing just the Sophie scarf because honestly, as you can see with the end that I first started with, the fuzz factor is pretty ridiculous. Like, I originally thought I wanted to do something akin to the Alex scarf, which is the Sophie scarf, but 2x2 rib. And I started doing that with this yarn, and I realized I'm not going to be able to see any of this definition. I also don't think I could have made it as long if I did the 2x2 rib, because it would have shrunk in more. So in order to get the width that I wanted, I would have needed maybe 2 skeins. So I just went with the simple Sophie scarf. And after I wash this, I think it's gonna really fuzz up, and hopefully I'll block it pretty aggressively to be long enough so that I can tie it in the way that I want. This is like pure luxury. I mean, it should be. I paid like $50 for a tiny skein. And I don't know if I'm gonna leave it pure white. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. I think I'm gonna wash it, pray about it, and see what happens. But this is my finished Sophie scarf. I've made a couple of these, and this is the biggest one I've made. And I can see why people like it. This was like a really mindless, easy thing. I was just in between projects, and I didn't want to think about anything complicated, and so I just put this on the needles, and now I've used that yarn that I had laying around that I didn't really have enough to do anything else with. So that's my finished Angora Sophie scarf, which It's super warm and super soft, which is why we all do this, isn't it? It really is. This is the last of my finished objects, though. Okay, whips. Onto things that are still being worked. From past videos, you'll all know that I've been working on my Talvinen sweater. I'm using Ralma Phenol in like a mustard and white and then a brown ochre kind of color. I'm not going to show that because I literally have not done anything different on that. I've just been trying to finish and start and do a lot of other things. So hopefully the next time you see me, that will be, hopefully it'll be finished, or it will just be more substantially done. I did, however, cast on my Ingrid vest. This is the yarn that I picked up from Wing and a Prayer Farm when I was at Rhinebeck, not this year, but last year. And this yarn is an 80% alpaca and wool blend. And it's like, it says on here that it's about, DK weight, but it's definitely not. It's definitely a worsted weight yarn. The Ingrid sweater originally calls for, I think, a US 6 to do the body. I'm knitting it in a US 7, which I think is good because I only have about 1,050 yards of this stuff. And so again, I am kind of playing the game of yarn chicken. Not really. I mean, I'm pretty confident that I'll have enough because I think her range is, it's like 860 yards for the smallest size, and I'm using a bigger needle size. I'm pretty confident that I'll get through it, and it is top down, so even if I don't make it as long as I want, I think it'll still be wearable. This is the back portion, and I've just done the neck shaping. So the next step of this is going to be to start working the increases and then start working through the different motifs. And I imagine what's going to happen is I'm going to pick up stitches along the top and then knit over for each front panel, join that shortly after so that I can do the neck shaping, and then I'll join it in the round on the bottom and then knit the rest. This first motif is just moss stitch, which is seed stitch, but you repeat the row twice. So you do knit one, purl one, repeat 2 rows, and then you alternate so that it's essentially a seed stitch that's 2 stitches tall. So there's 2 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches on top of each other, and they alternate on up. And it looks mossy, which is why they call it moss stitch. The yarn, I'm liking the fabric. Again, it's very fuzzy. It is fuzzing up quite a bit. There's not a ton of definition in this. I can still see the definition in it, so I'm not unhappy with it in terms of that. I guess it's always just a little bit of a wild card with these farm yarns, like what they're actually going to do. The one thing I don't love about it, working with it, is because it is so minimally processed, which this is a double-edged sword because I love that it's minimally processed, but it sheds so much. There's so much vegetal matter in this yarn that when I work on it, it looks like I just have little bits of nature all over me. And I feel like I need to vacuum after. Again, not a huge deal. Like once I wash it, a lot of that extra stuff will come out, but it makes it a little bit messy feeling to knit on. So I don't love that, but I love the way it feels. It is, I think, next to skin soft. This is going to be more like an outerwear vest piece. So I think it'll be crazy warm. It's a worsted spun yarn, and it's really gonna have some heaviness to it, I think. I think for that vest and the functionality of an outerwear piece like that, I'm really excited. I'm also really excited about the color. I've never made anything in this taupey color, but I think it suits my skin tone. I mean, you can tell me otherwise if you want, but I think it's a very classic color, and so I'm excited to have something like this. I don't have a ton to say about it because I haven't gotten very far, but so far I'm really liking the pattern. I think it's a great classic piece to have, and I think it's going to suit this yarn really well, which is, in my opinion, the hardest thing to master when you're knitting, is how to pair yarn and yarn combinations with patterns. It's a bit of a skill on its own, and so it's one that I'm always trying to think about first. Even before I think about what pattern I want to make, I'm like, what yarn do I have and what would look best and what is going to make me the happiest with the finished product in this yarn. So I always try to think about that first before anything else. The Tessellated Vest still is not done. And honestly, it's not much further along than the last time you saw it. But I have split for the front and back. This is where the armhole is going to be. And I have done that. That's the only change that has happened. I knit maybe another 3/4 of an inch since the last time you saw me. And then I split for the front and the back. So the next thing is to start doing each front panel and then do the back and then join it all together and then boom, we're done. I think I'm going to take this to my parents' house when I go to Thanksgiving this coming week and just try to bust this out. This is another one of those things that at this point I just need it to be done. I'm bored of it. I'm ready to do other things. I'm ready to cast on other things. I have other things I want to cast on, and it just needs to be done. I did make a mistake that I'm not going to fix on this. I somehow picked up 2 extra stitches on the back and 2 less stitches that I needed on the front. I'm just going to, let's say this is the back and this is the front for the sake of telling you what I'm going to do. See these cast off stitches here? I think there's supposed to be like 17. I am just going to cast off an extra stitch on the back side here, and then I will either make one or I will pick up a stitch in this first loop right before the first stitch on this needle when I come back to knit it. So I'm just going to place markers on each of those sides to indicate where I'm supposed to drop and where I'm supposed to pick up. That's again just there's probably a way better technique to do that. I probably should just take the row out, but I don't want to. And again, it's under the armpit. All of that is going to get picked up anyway for the ribbing, so any slight change in the stitches and where the bind off is going to be hidden by the fact that I'm going to pick up for ribbing. So just a little tidbit for you. I will say I am liking, I do love the way this looks. Like, I think when it's done, I'm gonna love it. I think I'm just finding it a bit frustrating to work on, and I'm not sure why, but I think it's gonna be super cool when it's done. I've been working on it for what feels like a really long time, and I just really want it to be done. I'm ready to do other things and try new things. So that's my tessellated vest. Hopefully the next time you see me, this and my Talvinen sweater will be done. I have some acquisitions to show you. I have some yarn that I purchased from a festival, or more like an event that my mom and I went to in Portland a couple weeks ago. Then I have some books actually that I just bought recently that I thought I would share here as well, because why not? Why not do that? The first weekend in November, my mom and my dad and I made a 3-hour trek down to Portland, Oregon to the Sacred Sheep event. This was put on by Ritual Dyes, who I believe are based in Portland. I would assume they're based in Portland, but it's a yarn shop, yarn company. And they put on a festival very similar to the Flock Fiber Festival that happened here in Washington earlier this year. All in all, I think Mom and I were a bit disappointed. Not because the event was bad. That was mostly because the kind of product that was there was just not really stuff that we gravitate towards. It was a ton of pastels, a ton of like real bright colors, a lot of indie dyers. Woolfolk was there because Woolfolk is based out of Portland. So it was really cool to see and touch and feel all of those yarns in person. And then there was one other woman there, and she was a shepherd up here actually on Lopez Island in Washington. And we really liked her booth. We both bought something from her. Mom bought a couple things from Moondrake Fibers because she was there. There were a lot of cool people there, just not really yarn that we were really wanting to buy like at that time. But blah, 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 blah. You don't care about that. What you do care about is what I actually bought. So what I actually bought was from San Juan Woolworks. And this was a woman who has a sheep farm up on Lopez Island, which is one of the San Juan Islands. And I bought 6 skeins of her Spy Hop yarn. This is a DK weight. This is a all natural undyed skein. So it just has fleece from a chocolate brown and a silver or a gray sheep. It is 3-ply. It's worsted spun. Like I said, DK weight. It's Finn and BFL cross lamb's wool. So BFL is blue-faced Leicester. I love blue-faced Leicester. They are a long-haired, long wool sheep, and I think their fleece is a bit softer than the classic Leicester or border Leicester sheep, and it's very, very shiny. And Finn, I'd never heard of Finn sheep before, but I liked this, so I think I probably would like them. But this is lamb's wool, so it's rustic, but it's not scratchy at all. This, I think, and you can feel the oils in it from being produced at a really small mill. I'm really excited about this. I went back and forth between like all of her colors. She had all pretty much naturally colored yarn, a lot of beiges, a lot of beigey gray. She had a cream color, and I just couldn't decide. I felt like this one was the most interesting that I bought, and I thought that it was a pretty good price. This was, let's see, where's the yardage? This was 258 yards per 100 grams, and I bought 6 skeins, and I think they were only $25 a skein, which usually when I see DK weight farmed yarn, it's like $30 or more per skein, and sometimes you don't even get 200 yards. So I thought that this was a great deal. I would absolutely go back to her again and buy maybe like her gray for a really classic like fisherman's sweater. I love that kind of thing. I had a pattern originally picked out for this, and it was a big, just stockinette, like almost bat-wing sweater. But now I'm rethinking that, and I don't really know what I want to do with this. I don't think I want anything with a ton of texture because the yarn is so busy, and it's also very dark, and I think that you'd lose some of the definition with it being so dark. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with this yet. I know I want it to be a pretty tight weave, but I still want it to be pretty big because I want this to be something I can wear outside and have it be a very practical piece of knitwear. It just feels like something that will wear like iron, and I want it to be, I want it to look nice, I want it to look classic, but I want it to be something that I can wear in a practical sense outside that will keep me really warm. So I'm really excited about this. It's very different than what I typically buy color-wise, but it's good to try new things. Okay, I'm going to quickly talk about the books that I've bought recently, just super fast. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this because it's pretty self-explanatory. But the first one is Brioche, and this book is by Nancy Marchant, and it is the essential guide to the brioche stitch, patterns, techniques, and a stitch library. I kind of just had it in my head that I really wanted to try and make a scarf or something, like a big scarfy thing in brioche stitch and have it be double-sided in terms of color. And I really want to learn and understand how they do like the brioche lace work, where you have all these intricate patterns that come out with the stitches leaning different ways and different colors, and that is reversible. I thought that would be so cool as like a big fluffy scarf that I would someday put together. And so I bought this so that I could maybe get some yarn and potentially do some samples, or just do some samples with the scraps that I have. But take my word for it, I was really happy with this. I thought that the illustrations of, you know, what's in here are super well done. It's very clear and easy to understand each step of a specific stitch technique, and the pictures are really high quality. I really like it. They go through everything. All the increases you could need for brioche, all the decreases. If you're interested in brioche, this is probably the best book that I saw reviews for online was this one. So highly recommend. And then I realized when I was purchasing that book that I did not have any kind of stitch dictionary, which I thought, that's kind of silly. I should have that. I'm a knitter. I want to try to make new things, so I should have a stitch dictionary. And so I ended up going with the Vogue Knitting Stitch, the Ultimate Stitch Dictionary, more than 800 stitch patterns. I'm not sure why I ended up picking specifically this one. I think because everyone raves so much about the just Vogue knitting kind of encyclopedia style book, and I thought, well, if they love that one, they probably would also really like this one. And I like it a lot. It has a ton of stitches that I've never seen before, and also has a very clear picture where it shows actual knitted fabric in that stitch, so you know exactly how it's going to look, whatever yarn you're using to make it. Whereas some stitch books that I've seen, it's like an illustrated picture of what the pattern is going to look like, and I don't like that because I don't think it's very practical. You can illustrate what something's going to look like with a pencil, but if you don't actually have a picture of what it looks like in a fabric, then I think that is a little bit difficult to translate in your brain. But I really recommend this. I haven't really utilized it yet, but I'm sure I will. I've been really enjoying it. It has everything in it. It has color work knitting, it has knit purl and how to create texture, it has a whole section on lace, it has a whole section on cables and color, I said color work, but it has everything in here. And if you just want to try out some new things and maybe use some scrap yarn up, I think that this would be a great way to kind of just have some fun, learn some new things, and use up some of that stuff and then figure out what to do with it later. But I think that is it for this episode. Super happy to be back. I have a ton of things still being worked on, and it feels good to film. I missed everybody. Super weird still for me, but I just really enjoy how flexible everybody is and how everyone's like so supportive of just being like, you gotta do what works for your schedule. And the past few months, not few months, but the past few weeks, month and a half or so, have just been crazy busy at my actual job. It's finally kind of slowing down a bit, and so I'm really looking forward to having more time to get my life together and work on these things and work on these projects and hopefully film some more videos for you. And yeah, keep investing in this little hobby now of tracking all of the things that I make. I find it really rewarding, and I really love the outlet of just getting to connect with you all and getting to connect over this hobby, because there's not a lot of people in my day-to-day life, as I've said, who share the passion and the passion of learning how to make your own clothing and how to make something out of nothing. I just think that that is such a cool thing. So I hope you are having the opportunity to do that in your life, and I hope that all is well. I hope you all are going to enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday if you celebrate in whatever way that you do. And I hope that you're all able to be finding joy and getting to make the things that you really want to make. So until next time, bye.